I'll be able to review this later. Okay. Beautiful.
All right. It's a beautiful day today, and I'm super excited to be here to speak to all of you. It's been a while since I've been back at Parker School. Was it 2004? I think I graduated, and I really, really love the atmosphere, and I love the location of Parker School. And that was one of my most favorite pieces. But more so was the teachers and the staff that Parker School had during while I was there. And I'm not sure if some of them are still there, but it just had a very unique approach to learning and really supportive, especially for young artisans. So I'm sure you're all experiencing that now, or you're gonna figure it out later on when you move into your careers and you see like, oh my gosh, my teachers were even more awesome than I already imagined, and that's something that you'll grow to understand even more so when you move on. But my name is Manaola Yap, and I'm actually from Hawaii Island. I grew up dancing. Actually, my family are all musicians and hula dancers, chanters, and cultural practitioners. We are from Kohala. We're from the north side of Kohala, of the island, and we've been doing hula and music and dance for centuries long, before predating Kamehameha the First. So it's definitely culture has played an integral role in where I'm from, and of course what I do today and why I chose my career path, moving into a fashion label. Uh, let's talk about. I kind of have like a little agenda because I know we're a little short of time, but I'm going to try and move through quickly. I actually took pieces from a lecture that I normally do for Kamehameha schools. But I really liked this lecture and I kind of tweaked it specifically for this presentation. But it's called Na'au or Never. And it's kind of a funny title, but I think it really speaks to my journey and what I had gone through as an entrepreneur and as a cultural practitioner and as an artist. And I think that that's an important role, especially relevant to what you folks are going through right now. Those of you who are preparing for college, or that are moving, or discovering yourselves artistically and your abilities in all fields of creativity. This is kind of, wanting to share my story from the beginning. Na'au is actually a concept that is very Hawaiian. And for Hawaiians, when we look at our feelings actually come from our stomach, right? Which is kind of interesting because it coincides with art, right? When they say, well, artists, good artists have a strong stomach, it's because a lot of the times, even scientifically, when we feel something, the first place we feel is in our na'au. And for the Hawaiian perspective, the na'au is a very important way for us to navigate and to answer questions when we are looking at, making life's most toughest decisions. And I really had to hone in on that through my journey. And I think that that's a big piece. Na'awao actually in Hawaiian means those who are enlightened, which means na'au, which is gut or your stomach, ao, which is enlightenment or light, are people who are enriched and full of light and full of creativity. And they say na'au po is people that are kind of lost. Po means darkness or to have without or to be without. So that's kind of been my medium of decision making through my journey. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I do, a little bit about what I do and how I kind of got there. The first thing I wanted to talk about was actually based on the purpose and decision and my intentions in creating a fashion label and why I did it. Being in a hula family and being in a family that's so culturally involved, there's a lot of kuleana, a lot of responsibilities that are bestowed upon us at a young age, and the biggest piece of what that is the passing of traditions and passing on of knowledge and culture from one generation, the generation before me, into the next. And I think that that was a big part of why I chose to move down this career path, because I had to look at the importance of that kuleana and how I could integrate my kuleana as a Kanaka Oiwi, right, as a child of Hawaii and as a native Hawaiian, especially, how I can integrate my kuleana into what I do because I love to do it, and understood that that flow and that creativity, especially using the culture as a platform and Hawaii, which is my home, as a point of inspiration, um, to fulfill my kuleana, would create this beautiful karma and this beautiful energy that would just move. And that energy is Manaola. It really is. Mana is the life, the energy, right? Or the life force. Manaola is that life force, that spiritual mana that is innate in all of us, and that movement is all a part of what I wanted to do. So when you look at Hawaiian art, as a Kanaka Oiwi of this time, it was important for me to look at how am I going to make indigenous culture relevant today and tomorrow, and how am I going to make sure that the generation of today find interest in our culture so that it doesn't become lost. And that is a struggle that a lot of teachers today have with the arts, especially with cultural arts, is trying to get people excited about the arts. And because there's so many distractions and so many other things and so many directions that you can go. But that was really my focus, was how do I take indigenous art and Hawaiian art and move it into the 21st century and beyond. And when I looked at that, I kind of had to look back at my childhood and understand what was happening around me. So my base medium is actually ohe kapala, which is kapa decoration. And that's actually based on these bamboo laths that are carved out of bamboo. I actually carved some new ones yesterday. I'll show you some of these. So these are all bamboo stamps. And growing up, with my mother being a kumuhula or a hula teacher, I was always around our native Hawaiian crafts. So there were always, pots of dye being made. We were dyeing fabric out of natural dyes. We were printing. We were making leis. We were gathering. And being in that atmosphere, when you're a kid, it's kind of normal, right? Like you're just like, oh, this is just what I do. Or sometimes you might think it's boring, or it's, you have to do this or you have to do that, But what I realized as I got into moving, getting older and moving into things, how valuable it was for me to grow up in that environment. And when I looked at that environment, I also understood that I was pretty much in a school in the traditional sense of an ohana, right? It's a family unit. We learn all these things and we're enriched in our culture through our surroundings, through our community, and through those who are around us. And I think that was one of the biggest keys for me moving forward into an industry that is completely cutthroat, right? I mean, fashion is a very serious business, and it's kind of intense because you're either trending or you're not trending, or one day what's new, the next day is out. So it's kind of one of those things where you really have to put yourself out there, and you really have to have your foundation really, really strong. When I looked at indigenous culture, and I, as a younger Kanaka, and I said, how do we make Hawaiian culture relevant, and how do we move it into the 21st century? And that question came in a lot of many different ways for me, and appeared in a lot of different discussions that I had at Hula. with our halau, as well as in with my friends who are all cultural practitioners in many different ways, from fishing to making food, cooking, and all those different aspects, and teachers as well. And when I looked at that, I said, if you look at an industry and you look at commerce, right, on the top of them all is pop culture, right? Popular culture is really how things become known, right? Who is popular right now? Our celebrities are all popular. Popular music, popular TV shows, art, you name it, food. So when I looked at pop culture, I said that's where we have to attach ourselves. We have to attach ourselves to pop culture. And that kind of was my platform or my technique of moving into the marketplace. Was, I said, first of all, it's pop culture is the most important because it's relevant to those today and it's exciting because it's trending, right? So pop culture was the first thing. And when I looked at pop culture, on the top of all of that, or the one category that is pretty much embedded in all the categories that are involved in pop culture, from music to all of those things, is fashion. And when I looked at fashion, it's something that I already enjoyed doing because I was already a costumer for our production company, as well as costuming for my mom's hula halau as well. So I looked at fashion as a strong point, a strong suit for me because I enjoyed doing it. And then of course, a easy way to impact the marketplace as an entrepreneur, because there wasn't a lot of Hawaiian fashion going on at that time. Um, I had also been involved heavily with a lot of the designers of the time when I was younger, because my mother used to actually put on fashion shows locally. So I grew up around Nakeu Avai, which is an older generation designer, but an amazingly talented designer. Of course, Uncle Sig Zane, who's from Hilo, and Kuhao and Auntie Nalani. They're also very close with my ohana. Both of our ohana are very close. And I grew up doing fashion shows and modeling for Sig Zane as well. Auntie Deneen from Manuheli'i also. Princess Kaiulani Fashions, a lot of those designers at that time. And I was able to, grow up in that environment and realize that a lot of our fashion culture had stayed in one place and was really stuck to one vision of what Hawaiian design and what Hawaiian fashion was known around the world to be, which is, your aloha shirt and your mu'umu'u, you know? So that kind of was like my little launch pad. I said, okay, first of all, there's not a lot of Hawaiian things going on. Me and my younger sister was also like, when we went to Hawaiian events, we're always about like trying to kick it up, right? Like we don't want to show up in just a mu'umu'u or like a holoku or just an aloha shirt. Like what's next? So we started to, I would stamp things and we would make things in my house and produce clothes that were all hand done, art preparation. And even in our shows, a lot of the costumes that we would create, our dancers would take them home or they wear them out. So they would take a top and wear it with jeans, and I'd come back to the show and I'd be like, oh, where's the costume for this? It's missing. And like, oh, sorry, I borrowed it and wore it out, or I went to dinner, or I went here and went there. And that's kind of really how it started to take off from there. So I decided to, go back to the drawing board and move into, going back to Ohekapala and how can I make this work? And I think that was a big movement for me. I think one of the other big pieces was that in the original Manaola piece, we were only doing things all hand stamped. And the hand stamp piece came because my family is a lot of traditionalists, right? We're all, in the arts. Like if we go to Mary Monarch, all of our costumes are done from scratch. They're dyed by hand. Every student carves everything by hand. It's stamped by hand. The leis are all made by our hala. We do not have other people make our lei. As those are the cultural piece is important because that's our way of connecting to our environment as artisans. and as just as humans, and being in connectivity to nature, that ecology that happens. Um, so when I first started, I was actually afraid to silkscreen my prints, and I had went to Japan, and my first set of prints were actually done in Japan. And my friend said, she's a graphic artist. She said, why don't you just do an art piece and let me set it up digitally, and let's burn a screen, and we'll make it. And if you don't like it, we'll try it. And if you feel that it's not pono, or it's not good with you, we'll burn everything. And I remember the first day when I opened the fabric, I was really, really nervous because I didn't want the spirituality the to leave me. Because on a spiritual note, our family's like super spiritual, so a lot of these inspirations and things that come to us are a part of our ancestral connection, and I didn't want to lose that connectivity, so that's why I was a little afraid. But I remember when we rolled the fabric open down the hall, this immense mana came from the bolt of fabric, and it was just completely overwhelming. And those who were all there just started to cry. And that piece was a big movement for me because I was able to feel that same energy and that same mana and that same Hawaiian integrity of the design, because I actually know that I carved those stamps, that I created that art from scratch in the traditional way that I was taught. And everything kind of just took off from there. We started with handbags. I did bags first because I knew that when I looked at clothing is a little hard because you have sizes, and there's a lot of sizes that you have to cover when you're selling clothes. So I actually started with handbags first because they weren't sized, and I started doing canvas first, and then I moved into Hawaiian underwear. I chose underwear to start as my first piece of clothing because one was it was not done at that time. Nobody had done Hawaiian underwear. Two is I looked at the marketing aspects of male underwear, and it was the highest grossing at that time. So I did men's underwear. And then three, I just thought we have beautiful men here, so why not, have a Hawaiian male underwear display. And it was actually well received. I remember when we first started, I actually had to hide them in my suitcase because I had them made abroad, because we don't create those kinds of fabrics here. And no place here, even in LA, could produce the quality that I needed. So I actually had them done in Japan, and I had to hide them in my suitcase. And I only made, like, I think 100 of each design. And so I was literally like bringing them in my suitcase when I was working in Japan, one suitcase at a time. And I had used some money that I saved up from dancing to make this first run of underwear. And the underwear were so popular that, of course, they sold out immediately every time we released a new pattern. And we had boutiques all the way from New York to Ibiza, private underwear boutiques and resorts that wanted to carry the line. They would airship them. They would send somebody over, even if they had to come and fly over and get them. I mean, that's how hot they were, and they trended everywhere, which was weird because, of course, they were trending here, but they were trending actually more abroad because it was exotic. If you look at fashion today, you have lots of Asian influence design, you have a lot of African influence design, you have a lot of Native American influence design. Very rarely do you find Hawaiian design embedded into the main fashion scene, which was why from that point, our main thing was to infiltrate um, mainstream fashion with Hawaiian fashion. And I had a lot of dreams. I said, I want to go to New York, and I want to have a runway show there. And I told, I just recently moved back to Hawaii Island, and I had told one of my friends when I got back, I was like, do you remember? And they said, yeah, I remember. You told me like one day you're going to go to New York and all this stuff. And they're like, look, you did it. And I said, yeah, but I feel like it was all a part of the kuleana, right? It's the carrying on of the traditions and the making it relevant today and bringing it forward in the right way. And the biggest piece when we went to New York was the fact that we wanted to bring Hawaii with us, and that was the big piece. It wasn't just about us; was about bringing the models. There's so much beautiful faces that we hear, a lot of beautiful talent, hair, makeup, all those things um, that support the fashion industry and that the fashion industry supports as well. So, it was a big movement for us to go to New York Fashion Week, and it was a big win for Hawaii, I think, when we did go up there because it really helped to broaden the scope of all the influencers and the publications there that we have amazing artisans here. And even after that, if you had looked even online, because I do a lot of entrepreneurial classes for different organizations. I've done talks for OHA, for the University of Hawaii. You've seen a huge influx in Hawaiian brands and brands that are trying to look at Hawaiian culture as a basis to express themselves and to grow businesses. And within that time period of when Manaola had started, we had kind of served almost as an inspiration for a lot. And I actually do mentor a lot of the brands that we have today. I do still continue to mentor them, and I also help them with production and things like that. So it really is about growing this industry and not just about Manaola, but about all of our cultural creatives and all of our new talent, blossoming and moving forward. But that was kind of how I started and how I move forward. New York Fashion Week, another really cool point that I thought was neat is when we had our show, a lot of the two front row seats were actually all, there was like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and GQ, and we had stylists, celebrity stylists, all kinds of people there to view the collections. And what's really interesting is that New York has an interesting vibe because it's very businessy, I guess you can say. Everybody's really intense there. And when they first came in, they had this really strong attitude, and when they had left, it was they definitely left changed. A lot of them had came up, and a lot of them actually came to our after party and had talked to us in the beginning of the fashion show. And I'll show a clip if you want to show the clip now. We can go ahead and play it.
I will get that started. Yep.
Yeah. So you'll see in the beginning, we actually did the protocol in the traditional way. We actually we did the olipau, which is the dressing ceremony. And it was important for us to do that because it would be the first time that the dressing chant would be performed on a main stage because it speaks of the topography of the land and the original draping technique of the first kapa, which actually were done here on Hawaii Island. And I did a little talk about Hawaiian fashion. A lot of those front row people, they had all said, you didn't, what fashion school did you go to? Did you go to fashion school? And I said, I didn't go to fashion school in the normal sense, but if you look at how I grew up, making dyes every day, I can balance the pH levels of a dye bath using traditional natural things instead of test tubes and chemicals. I guess you can say I did go to fashion school. With print design, I was taught how to balance the positive and negative aspects of print design, which is traditional kapa, which is the idea of ku and hina, which is the male and female sides of positive and negative space. I studied color theory, maybe not, in a classroom, but I can pretty much create all different colors and hues and tint them using traditional Hawaiian dyes. That would be color theory if you went to fashion school. This specific collection was based, it was called Kolani, and it was actually based on a seated hula style it's a hula that was performed for royalty. Kolani means belonging to the heavenly ones. And my idea was, if our Hawaiian royalty were alive today, as they love to travel the world, how would they dress in all the different parts of the world that they would travel to? So that was kind of the basis of this collection. Like, how would I dress them as a designer today if they were still alive? Yeah. This collection is all in black and gold. If you look at their hairline, that hairline is based on kiki pukai, which is actually a traditional hair adornment that was used on ancient ali'i. So if you see a lot of old etchings, you'll see Ka'ahumanu. She actually has white chalk paint in her hair. So it's different. There's Havena. Havena is when they actually bleach the hairline, and Kiki Pukai is where they would actually use coral lime to create a paint. And they used to actually paint the body as well. So I took that concept and did it in gold. And if you watched Desperate Housewives season, was it Desperate Housewives? One of those shows. Zach, what was the show that used Kiki Pukai? Anyway, one of the shows at that time, reality shows, saw this show and used it as the look for their Housewives of New Jersey. One of the housewives actually saw our fashion show, and she used this for her New Year's party, but she actually talked about Hawaiian designer runway show on her TV show. So it's kind of funny. This look also trended in Nylon magazine, and our photos were actually featured in Nylon Fashion magazine as a trending look for that year. So we actually have that article as well. They actually featured this Kiki Pukai hairstyling look. I love men in skirts because it's something that's very different. I like the masculinity in the flowing fabric, the beautiful contrast. This is a really cool story on this model here. This is Marina Menkipa, and I actually met her abroad. She's a real couture model. She's modeled for Vogue, Oscar de la Renta. And what's kind of neat about her is that she was so intrigued about the brand that she actually, when I met her abroad for a photo shoot, she told me that she was so in love with the brand and with the story that she wanted to walk in my New York Fashion Week show. So she actually flew herself to New York to model in this show. She also, after this fashion show, moved to Hawaii to become an intern in my design house. So she actually, she's from Russia. She's a Russian model. She actually came to our atelier in Honolulu, and she interned with us for 3 months as a part of my intern program. This model is kind of neat. She was from Kilo, and she speaks fluent Hawaiian. So it was kind of neat to have her as well as Mike Oliana. He also speaks Hawaiian. It was really neat to take Hawaii with us, which was really our goal. And to have indigenous speakers in the clothes. This is Mike Oliana also. It's really neat because the brand has become a platform even for models. So a lot of these models that you see in here, they didn't model at all. And I kind of pulled them out of their shell and was like, you should model, you'd be awesome. And after, kind of training them and moving them forward, a lot of them signed really big modeling contracts. One of those models is actually from Waimea, and I believe she moved home recently, and her name is Talea Leshetsky. So if you can ask Talea, she actually became a couture model for Marc Jacobs. And she's traveled a lot as well. And she's an original Manaola model. and this is almost our finale. So that's our Lady Tang dress. So traveling to China, that was my vision of one of our ali'i was what they would wear. And this is the morning dress, and this is one of the biggest pieces. This morning dress is based on a gown that was made for Liliuokalani. If you look at a lot of our royalty, a lot of times they're all wearing black. And the reason for that is in Victorian aristocratic culture, during the Victorian period, a lot of them wore black when they were in mourning because one of the royal family members had passed away. And during the Kalakaua, actually from the Kamehamehas to the Kalakaua, had a royal death within a span of 3 to 4 months. There was always somebody that had passed away. So that's why if you look at a lot of our ali'i pictures, they're always wearing black. And if they're in half mourning, they're wearing dark clothes such as velvets and things in darker colors, so like dark plum, emerald green, and dark blue. So that specific dress, which is the morning dress, was in dedication of our last reigning queen, Kalani. And if you look at the hat that she's wearing, it's actually a veil. And the veil is that we are in mourning for our lahui, for where we are today, but we are still looking forward into moving into the future as artisans. So that circular disc represents the hakaka'au, or the portal of time and space that artists, as Hawaiian artists, that we enter to receive inspiration and to connect to our kupuna, to our ancestors. But yeah, so that's pretty much my whole spiel. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much. I've sent out a request. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the. Sorry, I've got something going here. Put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that I monitor that for Manaola. Your work is just stunning. And there are comments going in the chat that they're so appreciative of the beauty of the work that you have done. So thank you for sharing that with us. It was really inspiring. Maybe if I can turn back to some of the comments that you made at the beginning, are there things that as you're doing this work, as you reflect on Parker School, like lessons that you've taken away from Parker that still inform the practices that you, or the way that you approach business or your relationships? What has stayed with you from Parker School?
I think one of the coolest things that I've taken away from Parker School, like I had said before, it's really the teachers that Parker School has, or that they find. They have a very unique approach to learning. One of those teachers is actually, sorry, you're going to hear construction in the back because we're clearing the land. But I think one of those were creative writing. I think was one of my favorite classes that I had taken at Parker School. And we actually had a really cool English teacher. I'm not sure if he's still there, Mr. Naj. Is Najita still there?
Yeah.
Mr. Naj is amazing. And if you even get a chance to be in his class and you take the time to actually pay attention to what he's saying, which sometimes sounds like a bunch of, like, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. But when you really take the time to listen to Mr. Najita, he's an amazing teacher. And I was in his English class, but he really, I think one of the important pieces where we learned about humanoid traditions, and I'm pretty sure he still does that class because that was like one of his favorite topics to do. And we watched some videos and read a bunch of things, but that class was an important piece into how I perceive writing today, because a lot of the most important thing in business, especially today, is communicating with your audience and making sure that your storytelling is cohesive to what you're doing and what you're, in any field, whether you're going to cook something or you're going to be a fashion designer or whatever it is. Being able to communicate your story through a creative way is a wonderful and very attractive way to present yourself as an entrepreneur. And his class, Mrs. Hilliard, was amazing. And then the English class and the creative writing classes were amazing at Parker School, and that's actually a piece that I still till today really love. And it's so funny because Mr. Naj would always tell. I remember him telling me, he's like, because my English name is Carrington, and he's like, Carrington, you know, your creative writing is amazing, but your spelling sucks. And it's so funny. But you know, a lot of those English teachers all told me, they said, your creativity is beyond. They're like, you would make an amazing writer. They're just like, you just need to make sure that you have somebody to edit what you write. But still today, that's something that I do use. I also think on the entrepreneurial side, I learned a lot from Miss Helekunihi, but I don't think she's there anymore. I think she's retired. I think I seen her daughter recently. But Miss Helekunihi was an amazing teacher as well. Um, when I was in theater, because I did a lot of production shows, Mr. Lee Drew, who was actually the drama teacher at the time when I was going there, um, he was amazing. He taught me a lot.
Who was the one that taught you about entrepreneurship?
Miss Helekunihi.
What are some of the things that she shared?
What was cool about Miss Helekunihi, she was an entrepreneur herself, so she used to sell furniture out of her house, and she would bring her furniture into the school too, sometimes to decorate her classroom. So I learned a lot about, you know, selling things and upselling things and putting a markup on things. And of course, the arts program. Is Miss Rorig still teach there? Wendy Rorig? No, not anymore.
No.
But anyway, the all the arts programs that Parker School had at the time were incredible. We used to have the art lab was down the road in the shed, in the green shed that's on the end of the road. I think she named it
the warehouse.
the warehouse. Yeah, so that's actually where our art class used to be, and we used to have to walk to it. But the arts program was amazing, and we had everything in there from pottery to, you know, oil painting, watercolors, and then it moved to the annex later. But she was an amazing art teacher. And I think what was cool is that Parker School had a lot of arts programs. We even had yoga, which was amazing. I don't know if you still have yoga,
Still
but
have yoga. Yeah.
that was an amazing piece for me too, because that adds a whole dynamic to the stress level that most students have during that time, you know, during that age. And it was really neat because I remember my friend telling me, like, we should go take the yoga class. And I was like, why? And he's like, because it's yoga. And we needed the credit because it was considered at that time a physical ed credit. So we had that. We even had hula at that time. But that yoga class was kind of amazing. And do you still have off-campus privileges?
High school, upper school students do. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing too. And the reason why I think that that was a big piece for me was because it really taught you how to be an adult and how to be responsible for things.
Mhm.
And you
How
really
long were
didn't.
you? Go ahead,
I
please.
was there, I think, like seventh grade. I think sixth or seventh grade, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will add kind of a comment that we still have a wonderful arts program, and it is so many of our students are involved in the arts. And we actually have a question from our art teacher, and she asked if you'd ever consider doing any heavier winter capes in the style of the ancient ali'i feather or kapa capes. And then a follow-up question to that was, where do we shop?
Yeah. Okay, so it's so funny that you bring that up because I actually have done concepts for that. So if you saw in that runway show, there's a few capes that are in that show. At that time, you know, of course, on a cultural scale, we have to be really careful at what we do on specific objects. I have actually used that as inspiration before in a few different concepts. It's just never made it to production. Because when you look at a cape item, and of course, this is a big piece of balancing as a native Hawaiian artisan, right? Balancing culture, especially when you're moving it into a mainstream marketplace. when you look at an ahu'ula or a Hawaiian cape, like the use of a Hawaiian cape, it's very important to see who's going to wear that cape, right? Because it has to be a proper person. So I am actually working on something where I'm incorporating the design concepts of the hoaka, which is an important piece of the aka, which is there's like a whole thing there based on Hawaiian cosmogony. But usually using the motifs from there, not actually using the cape itself as an ahu'ula, but using the design motifs and the styling of the cape to create a fashion piece. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where do people shop?
Our collections are actually in Honolulu at Ala Moana Shopping Center. We also have a store at Pro Ridge Shopping Center. You can shop us online at www.manaolahawaii.com. And our collections are also available at Saks Fifth Avenue. So those are our different platforms. We also do higher end pieces that are private, like couture and things like that. And those are actually in our atelier in Honolulu. And those are by appointment, as well as in the private showings that they have at Saks Fifth Avenue as well, in their private room. Mm-hmm.
We're running out of time, and I have one more question that I'd like to ask, and that is, what's your hope for the future of Hawaiian fashion? You've accomplished so much, but what's next for you? What do you hope to accomplish in the future?
It's actually perfect because that you brought that up. So I actually have a foundation called the Halekua Project, and that's actually our nonprofit organization, which is why I do a lot of these pieces, these talking pieces for schools and things like that. And basically what it's about is about helping the entrepreneurs that want to feel that connectivity to home and you know, even just Hawaii itself as a point of inspiration and moving into commerce and moving our culture into the 21st century. So our Halekua piece is actually my new piece that we just started. When I talked to my mom, you know, she was even saying, she's like, no, you can't do this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You have to do this now while you're relevant, you know, because I'm still young and still able to, you know, to do this. So our nonprofit organization is focusing in on helping to move indigenous culture and even the arts into the 21st century and supporting young entrepreneurs in supplying them with what they need to be successful. And that's actually a big project that we're working on right now.
Right. Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It is so great for all of us to meet you and to be inspired by your story and your commitment to Hawaiian culture. And we're so grateful that you're reconnected with Parker School, and we hope that this is the first of many opportunities for us to interact with you and to learn from you. And we hope to reintroduce you to Parker School and have you on campus and see how things have changed. So you're so generous with your time. We're really grateful.
Of course, that'd be awesome. All right.
Great. Mahalo, everyone. Thank you for your time. Lots of compliments coming to you in the chat. I'll make sure that I record the chat and send the comments to you so that you can see those as well. Manaola, awesome. Thank you, mahalo nui, for being with us. Thank you.
Aloha.
Have a good day. Aloha.